Hello and welcome to another edition of Sree's Sunday New York Times Read Along. After a short hiatus, we're back with another great episode. Our guest is Justin Nobel, an investigative science journalist and author of Petroleum 238, Big Oil's Dangerous Secret, and the Grassroots Fight to Stop It. Our host, of course, is Sri Srinivasan. My name is Neil Parekh. We're live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and our Digimentors website. It's been a few weeks since we've been with you. Steve Herman was our guest at the beginning of June. We're so glad to be back. Thank you for having us be part of your Sunday morning. What a great show we have planned today. In addition to having Justin, a former student at Columbia Journalism School, joining us, we're going to be focusing on the news of the week, of course, but also the presidential debate from last week and the fallout, particularly the New York Times' editorial calling on President Biden to step aside. There's also New York Times for Kids, a special print-only section that only comes out the last Sunday of the month. By special arrangement with the New York Times, we have it on our website for you to download the PDF. So we're looking forward to that. And there's also a special section on pets in this week's issue. Sri is definitely excited about that, as is Justin. My daughter's excited because she keeps wanting us to get a dog, and we keep saying no. But we'll take a look at what that section has to offer. It's all about the science around pets. So let's go ahead and welcome a few folks who are already checking in. Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar is joining us. Good morning and happy Pride. Today is the last day of Pride Month. Thank you so much, Sujana. Patty Freudenberg is watching from New York, and she says, welcome back. Thank you very much. We're glad to be back. Gunther is watching from Australia. It's afternoon over there. Sorry, Austria, not Australia. Gunther is saying good afternoon. And a special hello. Hi, Mom. Hi, Mom. Oops, I used the wrong hand. My mom is watching from Hastings on Hudson, and luckily I already told her that I broke my finger, so that wasn't a surprise for her. Ken Fisher is watching, reporting from a gorgeous, crisp 60-degree azure blue morning in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Ken, the weather sounds great. Thank you so much for joining us. We are live on, again, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and our Digimentors website. We're live on my Instagram, and we'll be live on Sri's Instagram as well if you check out his account. Let's go ahead and bring on Sri to join us. And you got this, Sri. I think you got this, right? That's Sri
Hi.
underneath the New York Times for Kids.
Yes.
If you hold it up a little bit higher, we'll get the full. There we go. You got this is the cover of the New York Times for Kids special section today.
How
Sri,
to do just about anything. I need a lot of guidance, so I'm glad to get this. And it's an
you're the boss,
amazing.
Sri.
Yeah,
You're the
exactly.
boss.
That's what it says. Uh, an amazing issue, folks, and you can It's available only in print or as a PDF on our website. So please go to digimentors.group, and there you will see the New York Times Read Along button. Click on that. You'll see Justin's show. Go all the way down, and you will see the PDF. It is only available till noon Eastern time. It's 8:30 Eastern time now. So please make the effort. If you have any kids in your life, you may not have your own kids, but your neighbors, your cousins' children, anyone, grandkids, they will love this. This is, I would say, Neil, for about 8 to 14, something like that.
Something like
Would
that. I would
be,
say
yeah,
even more, even maybe 9 to 12 or so.
yeah.
It's
But there's so
I have
much
to
to read
say,
here.
Amber Williams was our guest about 2 years ago now, I think. She's the editor of New York Times for Kids, and ever since we've had this great arrangement with the New York Times. It's only available in print, but they let us share it with our audience until noon on Sundays. That's a special arrangement we have with them, and it's a great piece. It really is.
And among the things you can learn, how to open a stuck jar, how to pack a better lunch, clean your messy room, fold a shirt. I need to learn that. Make an appointment, fix your Wi-Fi, clean up broken glass. This is just this fold out is worth it, folks. So go to digimentors.group, look for the New York Times read along button, look for the Justin Nobel edition, and then just scroll down, and there you will see a link to this. Only till 8:30 Eastern. Download the PDF, send it to all your classes and your friends, and everybody will find this useful.
Till noon Eastern.
Yeah,
noon
Eastern.
Eastern.
Yeah, noon Eastern. And we have other people watching as well. Sujana, who already greeted us, says so many New York Times subscription cancellations and Philly subscriber and subscriptions posted on Twitter. And that, what she's talking about, is the critique of the New York Times, and specifically, they are reacting to the opinion section, which has this front page which says, President Biden should leave the race. The country faces a threat in Donald Trump. The best defense is a stronger opponent. And that's the unsigned editorial by the board. And Neil is showing us a tweet that was sent out by our friend Manisha Sinha, who's going to be a guest on this show. She was retweeting Mark Hamill. And Mark said, the actor, Luke Skywalker, one off night doesn't change the fact that Joe Biden is the most legislatively successful POTUS in our lifetime. One off night doesn't change the fact that the former guy is a convicted felon, serial liar, and adjudicated rapist who is unfit for any office, period. And then Manisha says, not one, but 5 New York Times op-eds asking Biden to drop out after his debate performances, and not one asking Trump, a convicted felon, serial sexual predator, and a man who sought to overthrow American democracy, to do that. I'm glad I'm in Europe and away from the bankruptcy of this. And that's what Sujana is talking about. And Neil, you've seen that over the last few days. I was in London and before that in India, so I missed the run-up to most of this. And certainly there is a meltdown among large parts of the Democratic base that is very worried about what's going to happen. And here is a Philadelphia Inquirer posted an editorial that says, to serve his country, Donald Trump should leave the race. But we know Donald Trump is not out to serve his country. So I'm glad you pulled that up. And that's
a good counterpoint to the New York Times, right? I mean, that's what we should be talking about.
Absolutely. We will discuss all of this, and we'll get Justin's thoughts also in just a minute. Just to say hello to a few more people. Doug Levy is watching. Hi from just outside San Francisco. It's at 5:38 a.m., which really is home to the lowest summer high average temperature. The coldest winter really may be a summer in San Francisco, attributed to Mark Twain, but who knows? And Doug says the New York Times kids section would be good for him too. Are adults allowed to read it? In fact, it says somewhere, not editor's note, this section should not be read by grown-ups, but I'm definitely reading it. Please grab it at digimentors.group. Look for the New York Times read along button, and then scroll into Justin's show. So if you're watching, it's unfortunately only till noon Eastern today, Sunday, June 30th. And our friend Ron Thomas is checking in from Dubai. Hi, Ron. Thank you so much for being a former guest and just supporting us in every way that you can. We really appreciate it. And Ron says, so proud of the Philadelphia Inquirer. You're correct in your assessment of every paper asking for Biden to drop out. Amazing. So we'll get into that and talk about some of the controversy as we go through this. Thank you all for joining us. This is the Sunday New York Times Read Along, and it's brought to you by Digimentors, the company that we work in, Neil and I, and we work with a great group of folks. We do very cool stuff. We make shows like this one, where you can have your own podcast, video show live or recorded. We do big events and small events as well. We do digital marketing, strategic comms, training, workshops, staffing and recruiting. We help you hire digital people. And we also do event amplification. You have an event, we'll blow it up for you and make it seen around the world. We also are now doing AI workshops, policy, strategy, scenario planning. And I just came back, as I said, from India and in London doing these workshops and working with clients. We are grateful for the opportunity to work with anyone who would like to talk to us. It's Sri@digimentors.group if you'd like to reach out, or just write to Neil@digimentors.group. And we want to thank our sponsors, Muckrack, for making this possible, this show. Please check them out. They are the most useful tool for both journalists to have their own verified accounts and portfolios, as well as for comms folks or anybody who runs a company or a nonprofit to connect with journalists, the largest database of journalists in the world, verified journalists. And if you'd like to be a sponsor, please reach out to Sri@digimentors.group or Neil@digimentors.group. I am so excited for our show today. There is so much we need to talk about. A very important book, a great investigative reporter, the Earth at stake, everything that's happening, and also all the other news of the day. So let's go ahead and bring on Justin to join us. We are thrilled to have him here with us today. We are going to be talking about his book, as well as his work as an investigative science journalist. Please welcome Justin Nobel.
Sri, thank you so much, and Neil, for having me. And what a cool crowd. It's really fun to see people from all around the country, all around the world tuning in. So excellent to be here.
Well, we're delighted to have you. And you have to tell us where you are. And we have had people join us from around the world. We've had hundreds of guests at this point, but I don't think we've ever been in a backdrop like that.
Yeah, it's really pleasant, right? This is my girlfriend's dress shop, Miss Carrot. You can see the name there, and it's just it's a really colorful and more open space. So I actually take a lot of Zoom calls and interviews and give lectures from this space. Right now, the dress shop's closed. It's really early on Sunday morning. No one's looking for dresses at this hour.
But it might be fun if they show up and they're in the background. So spell that for us for those who are watching on a phone and can't read it. So if they want to look that up in the Hudson Valley.
Yeah, we're here in Hudson, New York, and she is on Instagram, and it's MISSKARRET. She's been in design and cartoon and TV and all different realms, and now she does handmade clothing, so screen printing and making everything from scratch. It's really cool. And this shirt I'm wearing as well.
Oh, very nice. I was going to ask. That's great. Of course, that's also an answer and a rebuttal to all the fast fashion and the problems it's causing around the world.
Yeah. So right, and also doing things like this. So this is repairing an old shirt that I got like 15 years ago at a thrift shop where I was a reporter in Point Reyes, California. And it was a great cut. It's actually a little bit like a Nehru collar, this shirt. I've always loved it. And Karen, who is behind Miss Carrot, has kept it alive with this innovative system of patches.
Looks like it was by design, which is wonderful. So welcome to the show. And I hope you have had a chance to tell your audience and everyone, please tag a friend who cares about the news, who cares about the planet. They can watch us live or later on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, and now on Instagram. That's a fairly recent thing, Justin. And we're happy that we can reach that audience as well. So just tag them and they can watch us live or later. So Justin, tell us a little bit about yourself. And then I want you to hold up the book and tell us all about the book as well.
Yeah, I write on issues of science and the environment for a number of different US magazines, investigative sites, also literary journals. We were connected, Sri, we first met because I went through this really rigorous program at the Columbia Journalism School. You get 2 masters. You get a master's in journalism and also a master's degree in earth and environmental science. That was an incredible amount of work, but what it puts, it shoots you out into the world with this ability to read science, to read a scientific paper, to be able to interview scientists, And science is this amazing record across time. You can follow it through a topic, across a topic, and actually go back through history. And that gives you a lot of power as a journalist. And it's really helped with the latest topic, which is a book. It's been about 7 years of research and reporting. It started as a story that was published in Rolling Stone magazine in 2020. That was a 20-month investigation, which is really long for a magazine story, but there is more to say and more to research. And so hence we now have the book, Petroleum-238, Big Oil's Dangerous Secret and the Grassroots Fight to Stop It. And yeah, there's the cover of the Rolling Stone story. And what you're seeing on the front there is really interesting. We'll get to that and why that's important, but that's a truck unloading fracking waste at a site called an injection well, where it's going to then be injected deep into the earth.
So what exactly is going to happen in there, and what is that material?
Yeah, so this is kind of one of we get right into one of the big aha moments of this topic, which is that a lot more comes to the surface at an oil and gas well than just the oil and gas, right? And a little, very simple drawing here done with the tool paint. But we look at an oil and gas well, many people imagine natural gas, the fuel, which still people use to cook food, that little blue flame. You imagine what fuels many cars still, or oil, really runs much of the world. But and also a lot of people now imagine carbon dioxide and methane emissions, but there is a lot more coming to the surface at a well than just that. The industry produces an incredible amount of waste. And when I say waste, I'm just referring to natural things coming up from deep within the earth. It just so happens, though, that they can contain a lot of really concerning contaminants. So the industry's primary waste stream, and you see that at the top of that list there, is brine. And even this is a little bit of a deceptive word. Brine makes you think of food and turkey, right?
Brining your turkey, yeah. It sounds like a harmless thing.
It does, and industry is notorious for labeling really complex, dangerous things with innocent names. The other term the industry uses is produced water, which also sounds harmless, but brine can contain toxic levels of salt, 10 times saltier than the ocean in some instances. So the salt alone is problematic, but there's also elevated levels of heavy metals like arsenic and lead, and elevated levels of radium, which is a radioactive heavy metal. And I just want to give you an idea, because this usually blows people's minds through, of how much of the copious nature of this waste stream. So across the US, every day, the oil and gas industry generates about 3 billion gallons of brine. 3 billion gallons a day, that's about 1 trillion gallons a year. If you took that 1 trillion gallons and put it into your standard oil barrel, which is like waist high, and then you stack them atop one another. So this is a year's worth of oil field brine, put them into a standard oil barrel, stack them atop one another, you would reach the moon and back almost 28 times. It's an extraordinary stream.
Wow.
And the industry has never really had a very good or safe idea on how to handle it. And that's led to problems across history and right up to the present moment.
All right. And so Petroleum-238 is a combination of all of these, or what is exactly what that is?
You mean the actual term, Petroleum-238?
Yeah.
Right. So there we're referring to uranium-238, which is one of the radioactive elements of concern that come up with oil and gas development. And your radioactive elements are kind of like a family tree. So you have something at the top, and it's radioactive. So what it's going to do is, at a certain amount of time, it's going to blast off a little piece of itself. And that's what we call radiation. You don't want to be near it when that happens. And having lost a piece of itself, it literally becomes another element. And that element may also be radioactive. So at some point in time, it may blast off a piece of itself and become another element. But at the top of the decay chain, sitting there at the beginning is uranium-238. And so it is really what starts, what's at the head of this radioactive decay process, or the head of the decay chain, as we call it.
It's all very depressing, but so important that we learn this. And I'm going to have you hold up the book jacket, Petroleum-238. They've known for 110 years, but they haven't done a thing to stop it. It's the secret of the century. And so I guess there are two subtitles. This is a description of it, but you also have a subtitle, which is, let me call it up here, Big Oil's Dangerous Secret and the Grassroots Fight to Stop It. So that's an unusual combination that you put the very long description right under the main title.
Yeah, this is, so what you have under the title, this is a quote from one of the more, someone really interesting in the book, and you don't meet them until the end of the book. They were the former regulator of the Department of Environmental Quality in Louisiana. Louisiana is a very beautiful state. It's a culturally rich state. It's also a state that's rich in oil and gas. And it's often regarded as one of the worst states when it comes to environmental regulations. And yet there was this period in the late 1980s when there was a very progressive governor who tapped this absolutely incredible person to lead the Department of Environmental Quality in Louisiana. His name was Dr. Paul Templé. And we meet him at the way end of the book. And he gives that quote, which you see beneath the title there. They've known for 110 years. And he's referring to this issue. They've known about the radioactivity content of oil field waste. They've known oil field waste was a problem, and yet they haven't really tried to deal with that problem.
So in 1904, they knew that this was a problem, and most of us are hearing about it now. We think that the oil and the gas produced is bad enough, but we don't know about all this other stuff that's also coming out. And so thank you, Justin, for giving us an introduction to the book. We're going to come back to the book. We're going to talk a little bit about the news, go through the front pages, and we're going to come back to you to talk in depth about the book. But there's a news hook. As you know, the Supreme Court has released its set of its judgments and decisions. And for those who are not watching from the U.S., they maybe not understand that what happens is throughout the year, the Supreme Court takes cases, rejects cases, etc., and then right before the term ends, June 30th, it then releases a slew of cases. And so I think Monday, there's a final day, and there are going to be some landmark decisions are going to come. And already several came on Friday, and almost all of them 6-3 judgments, all favoring conservatism, favoring the right. And one of these is actually the case is named after a major company in the oil and gas business called the Chevron case and the Chevron decision, because what they've done is undercut federal regulators, undercut the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. And for those people either who are too young or don't know this, the EPA was born under Richard Nixon. It was put in place by a very conservative Republican of his era to do that, and now they're undercutting it. So can you give us your quick take on what this means for all of us?
Yeah, I love the way you introduced that, Sri, by bringing up the birth of the EPA. So that the EPA comes up quite a lot in my reporting. And in the early 1970s, the EPA was a really robust agency with a very they really felt charged with their mission of helping to protect the environment in this country. We're coming out of the 1950s and 60s in this area of great growth, but also contamination of the environment. You can't drink the water, breathe the air. And so early on, the EPA was bold, and they also had some really complicated science that they were doing, pushing the limits on a variety of environmental issues. And so why the decision, the Chevron decision that you mentioned particularly, but the decisions now in general coming out of the Supreme Court, one ramification of that I see very much in my reporting is it further goes to not just restrict on paper and legally the agencies, but even it goes beyond that. It has a psychological effect, and it goes to cow them and really subdue them. And often the agencies are very hesitant to act on something, even if it is scientifically speaking the right thing to do, if they think that they're going to end up getting sued, and they will get sued by business, because if their curtailing profits in some way, again, even if it's a legitimate regulation, they're always going to be at risk for that. And so decisions like this kind of further cramp and just take away the guns of the agency, take away their resolve. And I think you already have a state where the EPA has really been diminished. They are under attack from a lot of different sectors of society. The left thinks they're not critical enough. The right thinks they're impinging on people and corporations' rights. And something like this makes it harder for them to really be a robust agency that acts on the latest science.
And that's one of the ways to look at America, where corporations have more rights than everyday people and citizens. Doug Levy says that the Chevron doctrine actually empowered federal agencies. The new court ruling upends that completely. And Neil is pointing out a headline from the Times where they're talking about the 1984 decision, the Chevron decision, that requires courts to defer to agencies and that they have the right, the ability to reasonably regulate, congressional laws or statutes that are made, that the agency has the power. And now that goes away. So thinking about healthcare, safety, the environment, these are things that are so critical at any time in our history, but now with climate change and the dangers of that, it's just going to be even worse. And this is where anybody who says there's no difference in the candidates, or there's no difference in the two major political parties versus the minor parties, they are wrong. And I just saw a headline, Justin, that the average start date of the hurricane season in the Atlantic that affects America is August 11th, but Hurricane Beryl is already here and going. And what is it? It's not even July 1st. And you can say it's an anomaly, whatever. Climate change is happening, and it's going to cause all kinds of havoc, as we've seen. When I was in London, there were a lot of jokes about how they're going to be able to grow champagne in England now because of climate change and all of that. So we are going to be tested as a country, as a planet, and our politics have a role to play in all of this. And we'll talk to Justin in depth about all of that in just a few minutes. Let's look at the other headlines. Let's see. Justice's ruling sharply curtailed. This is that headline, the lead story. Eroding regulation, the string of interventions with little precedent on climate cases. More mayhem in the trenches. Ukrainians building a trench in the country's east. This reminds me, obviously, of pictures from World War I, Justin. Please jump in if you want to comment on anything you see here. Otherwise, we'll let you catch your breath. One of the things Justin told us, he's not a Sunday morning person, and he did this for us, so we appreciate it. Biden's debate breeds doubts in donor class. Contributors weighing how to respond. So that's a big story. We'll come back to that. Navy SEALs lost to suicide share a pattern of brain damage. Lab found blast wave injuries, but data stayed hidden. And that's one of the things that we've learned from Justin, is how data and science affect so much of our lives. And when it's hidden, we need investigative journalists to speak up and fight and reveal these secrets. And so Neil and I sometimes get critiqued or criticized for doing the show. It's about the New York Times, but it's not always the New York Times. This is really about, Neil, about information, misinformation, fighting that. And the Times is just one way we do this. We have had guests from almost all the major publications in the U.S., and we're going to continue to do that.
The
and
Inquirer,
yeah,
the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the Dallas Morning News. We've had
Sun Daily, yep.
Chicago Sun-Times, the Toronto Globe and Mail, the Collegian Times as well.
The Washington Post, yeah.
And the Washington Post several times.
Well, I was going to say the headline you just read, Sri, really about the data remaining hidden. It brings up something that's come up in my reporting. Because again, I'm going through the catalog of science. So I'm going back to scientific papers written in the 80s, the 90s, even going back to the 50s, the 40s. And one initially might think, oh, well, those papers are not necessarily trustworthy. They're older. Our science wasn't as good, but absolutely not. The most rigorous papers, the most kind of brightest and clearest scientific papers I have found are actually the ones that were written in the 1930s. Incredible papers. You know, when we were first learning about radioactivity, some brilliant scientists wrote really crisp papers, and I see it. I do see it as what you mentioned before. You know, now many universities do get a lot of funding from a variety of different corporations, and I think it's harder to write with that crispness. And then you see some things like this, where data is hidden if it's not conveying, you know, a certain picture. So I love finding the old scientific papers, you know, going back well before, and the earlier the better. 1904, like the one you posted.
Amazing. You should say that, because most people will think it's the opposite, that we are more modern, more savvy about this stuff, and we know about the conflicts of interest. And of course, there have been cases, including famously the nutrition department of Harvard being paid to write negatively about fats so that they would get sugar off the hook, big sugar off the hook, as we know. So I'm glad to hear that perspective. Naomi, by the way, is watching from San Diego Airport at 6 a.m. heading to New York City. She usually watches from the Upper West Side. And Paula Kiger, longtime producer of this show, is watching from Valdosta, Georgia. And
she's on grandma duty,
yeah.
Paula. So great. I wanted to point out, Sri, you also have a couple of comments on Instagram, which we can't put on the screen, but I want to read out.
Sure.
Diane Stefani is watching from Margate, New Jersey, and our good friend Walter Grayson, three-time guest on the show, says, and I just want to read it: "You're the only news program I can watch today.
Oh,
You're the only news program I can watch today, with everything going on."
wow.
And to your point about how we focus on, you know, the news, whatever it is, and when we need to criticize the Times, we're more than happy to. But Walter, thank you for that endorsement. I might frame that and put that on the wall.
Please do. And he is Professor Greason, who
Yeah,
is the
professor
professor in
of
the Department
history.
of History at Macalester College. And he's really the preeminent historian in Afrofuturism and many other important topics.
And his big project, we actually were able to focus on this early in the year. He just put out with his colleague Tim Fielder the graphic history of hip hop, which is an incredible project. It's doing really well. It shows some of the historical background and some of the politics behind hip hop. And I'm going to take a moment with your permission, Sri, just to share with folks how incredible this project is. If you take a look, celebrating 50 years of hip hop. So if you pull that up, you can see this is the cover, and it looks at everything, the evolution from the 70s to the 80s through the 90s, and just look at some of the panels that they have. Just great artwork, and it's being used in schools across the country. So great job, Walter and Tim Fielder, who were both guests on our show earlier in the year.
Amazing. Thank you. And folks, this is the New York Times Read Along. That's Neil Parekh working behind the scenes, occasionally jumping in front and talking to us about what's going on. He's broken his finger. He revealed that when he waved his hand.
Yeah.
And he told his mom in advance. But his daughter has been a guest on our show, and she loves the New York Times for Kids section. So everyone, this is available only in print, but if you're watching live for the next 3 hours till noon Eastern, Sunday, June 30th, you can download and get your own copy, which is the only way to get it anywhere. So please go to digimentors.group and then look for the New York Times Read Along button. Look at the photo of me and Justin, and then scroll all the way to the bottom. You will see New York Times for Kids, the PDF. Please download it. Send us a photo of you holding it or reading it with a kid in your life. Doesn't have to be your own. Anybody between, I would say, 8 and 12, 9 and 12, 9 and 13 will find it very useful. And this issue is particularly good. It's called How to Do Anything, and lots of tips that adults will also find helpful.
And some people we know, Sri, will download the PDF and email it to family and friends. So definitely share it. Once you download it, you can share it as widely as you can.
Ellen's watching from New York City. Pradnya is watching from Silver Spring. Great to see you folks. And Luann's watching from Northern Michigan. And Diane, who is up at 6 a.m. The New York Times Kids section is amazing. It comes through with a warning that it's not for adults, that I admit I read it anyway. And so do I, Diana, and great to have you all on the show. We are talking about the news. We're talking about what's going on. Diana's a big pet person. I understand Justin is too. And the New York Times has a whole section on, only in the print section, but maybe there are online versions of the story, Pets, how science went to the dogs and cats. And a great looking young man or woman on here, a guy on here, guy or gal on here, I'm not sure, but just great photo. I hope they give, it's Max, and Max is a 2-year-old German Shepherd, Belgian Husky mix, was rescued in an emaciated condition, but is now a healthy participant in Darwin's Dogs, a science organization that investigates animal genetics and behavior. And Justin, you were telling me that you have cats and dogs?
Yeah, no, well, I really can relate to this article, because I think if you are one, of a scientific mindset and you have pets, you have this little sample size that you can constantly observe. I mean, the sample size of like 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, but you see how they move. And I remember this incident where we used to live in New Orleans, and the cat, one of our cats, Sally, would always go through the window. It would come in and out through the window, and sometimes the bathroom window, we would forget to open it, so it would be stuck out there whining. And Sally had just seen me outside, because I was outside and Sally was outside, and then Sally went to the window and was whining for me to let her in. And I had this realization that Sally thought that I could be in 2 places at once. Sally must have had a different conception of geographic space, because if I can't be by the window, I'm here. I can't be inside, I'm outside. But Sally didn't understand that. So I think there's a lot to learn from this careful observation. I'm interested in this. And
Justin, was really nice of you to go out and get a paper early in the morning and bring that out. Here's an important story. Are we loving our pets to death? Treating animals like humans may not be good for them or for us. Wow, that's fighting words, Linda Baker, who's written this. And Neil, by the way, is very skeptical of all this, because he's trying to avoid getting a dog for his daughter, Emily.
She did a 100-slide presentation for me and Pam to try and convince us to get a pet.
It didn't work.
We told her it wouldn't work. We said, you're welcome to go through it, but we're still not getting you it.
100 slides. This was before ChatGPT.
Before ChatGPT, but I do have a science question, actually, and it's interesting because that section is focused on the science of pets. Walter actually chimed in on Instagram. Justin, a question for you on the history of scientific journalism. How has the subject matter evolved in complexity since 1930? How did the expertise of journalism grow? How early, how long has, I mean, you're an investigative science journalist, but and that master's program at Columbia. Can you talk a little bit about how that has evolved?
That's a fantastic question. I don't know if I have done the research to answer it going back to the 1930s. What I can say is that even the fact that I can easily access papers from the 1930s gives me an incredible toolkit that I think was harder for journalists before the digital revolution. I still spend a lot of time in libraries because libraries have, other than books, amazing records of old journals. And it used to be, to get a journal from the 1930s, you had to go to a library. There's a great site called WorldCat.
Sure.
And you could type in an article and it would tell you the library closest to you that had that journal. Now much of this is online, and so that is incredible power. As we know, the internet has provided a variety of ways to harness the world swiftly, but it gives me a lot of power to be able to dig through time. I would love to speak to a science journalist from the 1930s and ask, how long would it take you to compose such an article, because I think even finding the information, but certainly in terms of investigative reporting, I mean, some of the heroes of the day and of the profession were writing in this earlier time and really showed that the key has always been the same, which is hold power accountable, stick close to it, and follow the trail of money, the trail of accountability. And those lessons, have been applied well before the digital era.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that. Sri, back to you.
Folks, that's Justin. He is talking to us about his big new book, Petroleum 238, and the dangers of not just the oil and gas, but what comes after and with it, and how it's been a secret that's been hidden for more than a century. They have known these dangers. One thing I will say before we go back to the paper, Justin, is that in my classes, I compare the AI industry with oil and gas and cigarettes. As you know, both of those industries denied for decades that they did any harm. You might know that in the 50s and 60s, cigarettes were promoted as a healthy lifestyle and medical tool, and now we know the truth. But the AI business, instead of waiting decades to say that there's no harm, they announced within 6 months of the launch of Gen AI a report that said that the risks from artificial intelligence destroying the world are the same as pandemics and nuclear war. So they took a completely different tack, saying, by the way, they had no solutions and they're not going to stop what they're doing, but hey, we're telling you up front. So this is, and as you know, there's been so much great research that's come out that Exxon knew in the 70s what it was doing. And many other companies are like that as well. And we know the public relations exercise that BP went through, just call itself Beyond Petroleum instead of British Petroleum. And that's what they said that BP stood for, things like that. So can you reflect a little bit on these kind of decades-long, centuries-long efforts to hide?
No, it's interesting the way you bring it up, because I think the papers, I'm sure there's really detailed reports in the AI community among researchers kind of predicting what may come, stating harms in a way that is more candid than what's presented to the public. But these things don't really become relevant until the harms happen. It's hard for it to be, it's exciting now and you're excited about it. But I think one of the things with journalism, it's like, there was great journalism to show that New Orleans had major vulnerabilities in the face of a Category 3 hurricane. And that really wasn't widely read until the category, until Katrina hit. And then that journalism becomes more relevant. And so that's just a thing with human nature. But yeah, the record is laid. And that is our job, to try and bring it out and excite people about it before the disaster happens, or before things get so far as they can't be altered.
What is the situation in the scientific community in dealing with these kinds of hidden and now not as hidden dangers? Are people much more forthright about it? The conflicts of interest, talk a little bit about that, please.
Yeah. There's a couple of different things that play with this issue. One is that the oil and gas industry is just so complex. And so I think for years as a reporter, I was staring closely at the industry, but there's so many trucks and tanks and pipes and tubes. Initially, you don't really know what's going through each one. You're just focusing on maybe some of the bigger picture things, an oil spill or climate change, which is a very distant than what's happening actually at the wellhead and in these tanks and pumps and pipes and tubes. And it took years of reading and time in the oil field and in oil field communities to really put together the pieces. There was actually a front page New York Times news story from, I think it was the late 1980s, radiation danger found in oil fields across the nation. And you could probably look that up, Neil, and it's incredible. It ran on the top of the fold. And the quotes are really striking as to the dangers that radioactive oil field waste pose. Now, this article had some waves, but in the end, we don't know it. Most people don't know it. And the issue kind of dip down below the surface. I think part of that is the complexity of the topic, and there's so much other news happening, and there's pets.
It's so much to cover, right? Chris Gorman, hello, watching. It says, hi, Sri. Good morning, Sri and Justin. watching from New York, New York. And Gunther is watching from Austria, says, when my cousin wanted to get a dog, she would constantly say, apropos dog. Also, after totally unrelated topics. For her, it worked. So I gather it just kind of brainwashed her family into allowing a dog. And Neil says, interesting, I'll make sure not to mention that to my daughter. So, I have to say, Justin, I now play a very happy dog owner, but I was bitten twice in India by dogs. And I got those 14 shots in the stomach that they gave out in the 70s. And so I was terrified of dogs. I fought my wife for 15 years, my daughter for 8 years, saying no, no, no. And finally we got the dog. And now, of course, I'm happy to walk her twice, 3 times a day. And we already went for a mile-plus walk this morning. We got up at 5:30, partly because of my jet lag and because it's getting so hot. So in the summer, you got to get out early. Otherwise, you just cannot deal with this. And here's the story. Neil found it. Broken hand and all, broken finger and all, radiation danger found in oil fields across the nation. And that headline is December. What does it say? Let's blow that up a little bit. Yeah.
December 3, 1993.
Yeah. So that's a long time ago. And Justin was still able to put out his book saying this is, not known publicly or as much as it should be. So that tells you about, as he said, attention and so many other things. Yeah.
And you can see the placement on the front page, as Justin mentioned, above the fold in that middle column.
Yep.
So very, very interesting. And this is what it's a better look at it, actually, right here.
Yeah.
So let me get that for you.
Yeah. And here it is. And yeah, you can see that right there. Kohl's coalition elected to lead unified Germany. Wow. And we're right in the middle of elections in Europe. A snap election is on the front page of the New York Times today. Snap election in England, snap election in France. Macron just voted in his election. The far right is ascending. There's breaking news this morning that Viktor Orban, the right-wing leader of Hungary, is now teaming up with a couple of other countries, including the Czech Republic, to create something called Patriots for Europe. And it's going to be a coalition of right-wing parties that we could not have imagined in 1990 when the West won the Cold War, that a lot of these countries would be banding together and coming up with these extreme policies, right-wing populist policies, which of course Trump loves. And here's that snap election. Before we move on, Justin, I'm just going to pull up on screen a slide from my AI workshops that says AI will require $1 trillion of funding in renewable energy to reverse the increasing electricity demands of data centers. So you may not have seen this stat, but can you just reflect on where the heck are we going to get this? This means, and it's because these data centers require a lot of energy to create. If you're making, you're doing any kind of Gen AI project, it's just every search, every prompt needs all this electricity. So whatever you might know, I'd love to hear.
Yeah, I've wanted to do a story for some time, and this really, to me, tends into science fiction, where you go to a data center, because this is where the memories are housed. This is where people's history are housed, relationships are housed. Often in like a desert space, in these big, cool buildings that, as the article points out, takes a lot of energy. What I know, Sri, is I have done some reporting around some of the pledges of large companies like Meta, Facebook, and there's this incredible story I uncovered, which is in West Texas. Facebook, these companies often say they are renewable, the company, and they have a lot of data centers, but they say they are using alternative or renewable energy to power them. And I looked into this in one case. And what you often have is they're setting up large solar arrays out in the desert where land is cheap and there's good sun. But what are those arrays powering? And in this one instance, Facebook has this incredible solar array in West Texas, in Andrews, Texas. And the energy is actually going to power Chevron's fracking operations. And yet they get renewable credits for that they claim are making their data centers green. And so when I see that, I see like there's incentives, of course, to put up government incentives to put up these solar farms. There isn't really a true circle, a true connection to this idea of sustainable living, and then the way it's routed through corporate, the corporate world. This is what develops, and it's a major disconnect. So yeah, this is a big problem. That will stay with us certainly as more and more data centers are needed.
Of course, once you mention animals, Justin, a lot of animal lovers come out. Linda saying a big black dog bit me, so my mother got us a big black dog to help me overcome my fear. It worked. Linda, what a unusual thing your mom did. That is so wonderful. And there you can see my dog, Tara. Tara, say hi. She's not interested right now. I think pets got used to all of us being on Zoom calls during the pandemic and don't show up as often as they did in the early days of the pandemic. And Ron Thomas says, I grew up with a Cocker Spaniel. When my daughter was small, we bought her a Cocker Spaniel. Now she's on her own and she has her own Cocker. Their generation. I call him my grandson. Got me thinking about getting another. Love dogs, especially Cocker Spaniels. That's amazing, Ron. That's so cool, and I hope you get one. And Sujana says, what I most love about the New York Times Read-Along, cross-pollination, AI, energy, solar, petroleum, fracking, keeps me thinking. Thank you, Sujana. Another frameable quote there, Neil. And Sujana's been a guest on our show multiple times, and we must have you back in the fall to talk about everything that's going on. Sujana is a great ENT surgeon here in New York, and she and her childhood friend, Marina Korean, my childhood friend, hosted She's on Call, amazing show during the pandemic talking about this. And Justin, as a science journalist, I'm curious how you got through the pandemic with all the disinformation, the misinformation that you had to deal with every day. I'm surprised you have any hair left.
Yeah, well, it's a good question, Sri. I was, deep in the stage of reporting and researching this book, and in the places where I was doing much of my reporting, which are oil field states, often conservative states, there was no pandemic to many people. So the people I was speaking to were still rolling. Other than that, short period when there was a shutdown for everyone. So I, kept my journalism going, and I was out in West Texas, I was out in Oklahoma, and it was such a stark contrast, of course, coming from New York, where everyone is still locked up with masks. And then you go out to West Texas, and they're like, what the hell is that thing on your face?
In fact, some people got insulted that people like you or me would have a mask because they think it's like a government conspiracy, it's a muzzle. I can't remember all the things that people said, but there were some horrifying things they said.
Yeah. But there's another thing that developed, which is a lot of my time is spent in communities that have some serious environmental harms, and they have terrible emissions to deal with, or a waste pit or a landfill. And for them, the pandemic was kind of one more thing stacked on a mountain of environmental concerns. And sometimes when they went through the, triage and put the concerns to the top, other things actually rose higher despite the real risks of the pandemic. All that for me meant, my reporting went on as much as it could during much of that time. In fact,
you were able to get your work done because of that, because you were out there. If you had been covering something else, you may not have been able to make as much progress as you did and have. And so congrats again on the book. Let's hold it up.
Hold it up.
Petroleum 238, The Dirtiest Secret. I'm sure you worked on a lot of subtitles. The Dirtiest Secret in the Oil Industry. We can all brainstorm some. America's Radioactive Secret. I like that. And this is your story, and you are writing to change the world. It's an amazing thing to be able to do, Justin. So congrats on that. Folks, we have about 25, 30 minutes left with Justin. He's an investigative science journalist. Ask him anything. He'll tell you. We'll talk more about his book in a few minutes. We're going to go through the paper and your comments. Where are you watching from? We'd love to hear where you're watching from. We love that when people tell us. And Diana says, I bonded with my husband of 25 years over a love of dogs. It was our love language. I like that. And let's see what else is happening. Eric is watching from Chappaqua, New York. Joins us usually from Ottawa. And Naomi says, my rescue rock star Janis Joplin has brought so much joy into our lives. Adopt, don't shop. That's an Americanism where we tell people instead of getting dogs from a breeder, get them from, rescue them if you can, as we have. More dog stories, folks. We're going to move on past the dogs, but my brother has a French poodle. We got at the age of 10. We got at age 10. We were in constant rivalry for our parents. He usually won. He also loved to get me into trouble and did this. Neil, get a dog. Ultimately, you'll love the dog. And Linda says, watching from my new home in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Wow, Linda, congrats. Beautiful countryside. And I also know, Linda, home of Tump Country. Many of your neighbors you may not even know, or you may know from all the signs all over rural Pennsylvania. But congrats on the new home. All right, let's get back to the paper. A Nepalese harrowing escape from the Russian army. This is Russian army snare. I haven't read this piece yet, but in many poor countries, citizens are sent to Russia thinking they'll be working. Instead, they are put to work as cannon fodder, literally, by the Russian army. So that's that story.
No, I mean, this is just journalism at its finest, Sri. This, I think, is the type of story that makes people want to be journalists. I mean, to bring something like that to light, it's an absolutely incredible story.
Kaveri Madhavan, wonderful author, Indian-Irish author, is watching from Dublin. Hi, Kaveri. Thank you for joining us. Makran Boot is watching from Brooklyn, building a dog run in Gowanus, in Park Slope, Gowanus, towards a community garden, 615green.org. So if you're in that area, you'll want to check that out. And Luann says that 1990 New York Times article that Justin put us onto is mind-blowing. Justin, we have to get in touch with Keith Schneider if you haven't already.
Yeah, I often try and get in touch with some of these people from the past. I'm not sure I have tried with Keith, but yeah, Keith, if Keith is still around, we do need to do that. Thank you, Luann.
And Raja is watching from Princeton with his black cocker, Max. And Max is also the name of the dog on the front page of the Times section. And Raja Chaudhary has a fantastic film out. It's called America's First Guru. And it's the story of Vivekananda, the Hindu priest, monk, who captivated America in the late 1800s. And it's a PBS show that everyone should look up, America's First Guru. All right, Justin, we've only made it to the front page. We have about 4 more hours of reading to do here, so we're going to speed this up a little bit. One thing they do, fun thing in the Times, you may have seen this, is where they take one word and see how it has evolved over time in the paper. And so that's a nice, so here they look up the word shade and they talk about how it's used. As you know, it has different meanings. And so, and of course, a scientific meaning as well. How to sleep better in the heat is a comment here that we're getting. Tell us where you're watching from. How are you dealing with the heat? Unless, of course, you're south of the equator, as we were when we went to Machu Picchu this summer. We're a non-hiking family, Justin, and we went hiking in Machu Picchu. It was an adventure, to say the least. Philippines contends with legacy of drug wars horrors. And more about the snap election. And here's a pledge, making good on our $5 billion pledge. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp opened Recycle Box Factory. And you mentioned some of these pledges that companies do. Some of it is greenwashing, some of it is real. Do you have a easy way for people to tell when something's greenwashing and something is real?
There's a lot of good journalism now trying to follow these pledges. So, I mean, as a journalist reading that, my first thing would be to go to that box factory and see what's really up. But yeah, with powerful industries, this becomes a really difficult challenge. And it also gets into an interesting conversation between, activism, journalism. I spend a lot of time with people on the ground in communities who are very worried about an issue and following it closely. Some people might call them activists and say, well, you need to be wary about those people. They're too opinionated. I think that these people are the front lines of investigative journalism. And to me, the activist journalists are the one who cover business without thoroughly critiquing and investigating what the ramifications of the practices are. That's an activism in the favor of the corporation. And that's, I don't think, what journalism is about. Journalism is about, covering from the bottom up, not the top down.
Thank you. Well said. This is that Nepali man's story. It's a full page inside, and it talks about how he enlisted for the money, and of course has suffered a great deal in part of the war. There's a whole other page about how motorcycles, not tanks, are being used by the Russians. Let's keep going here. Neil, is the page a little more fuzzy than usual?
It is, Sri. It is.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. So what I might do is, let me turn that off and let me pull up the paper.
You want to hold it that way?
Glance at it this way. In Australia, from rogue to victim. It's much easier to read, isn't it, Justin? This way. So all 28 acquitted in Panama Papers trial. The defendants were cleared of charges of money laundering. And you know that Panama Papers were this big international investigation consortium of many major newspapers, and they were acquitted, all 28. But that's only one case, I believe. Israel moves to legalize 5 settlements in occupied West Bank. So this is another side of the war. And reformist faces hardliner in runoff for Iran's presidency, we know, as a result of that helicopter crash. Happy Pride Month, everyone. This is the end of Pride, but Pride unfurls on Main Street with mix of joy and angst. And in New York's small towns, June events hold special meaning for LGBTQ people finding much needed community. What's it been like in Hudson, New York?
They had a big Pride event here. Hudson is very prideful, and I think it's a really welcoming community. And yeah, there's been a lot of activities up here in the country.
Here's an interesting story that has environmental and other connections. A rare white buffalo arrives in Yellowstone carrying a message. A calf fulfilled a Lakota prophecy and signals the earth needs help. Wow, what a story.
Yeah. And there was a festival. I was just talking about this with my girlfriend, a festival in New Orleans having to do with the white buffalo. This is something that runs across cultures. And a lot of people actually that in my circles, reacted to the debate and some of the other news and looked at that white buffalo story, this confirmation that it's end times.
Yeah, great. Speaking of end times, in case of outbreak of bird flu, officials in New York prepare. Drugs stored, but experts have worries. What have you learned from the pandemic that we should, what are some lessons from the COVID pandemic that we can look out for with bird flu? And are you worried or not worried about this? What is your thoughts? And folks, if you're just joining me, I'm reading the paper in this unusual way because somehow my camera is not as sharp. So I'm doing it this way, but therefore I'm talking away from the microphone. So sorry about that, folks.
Yeah, no, was that a question? I think there's been great, the journalism around viruses. It has actually it's been a really niche part of science journalism for a long time. And even the writing, going back to Michael Crichton and well before, but the micro world is a super, super important part of investigative science journalism that connects to the macro world. And the main thing, I remember actually a class I took at Columbia on viruses that cross over between animals and humans, which may or may not be at the root of the coronavirus. But in a world where we impinge further upon the environment, this will only become a bigger issue. There's been a lot of great science journalism on that topic. And this reminder that we are vulnerable. We are very vulnerable here on this earth. We've created this wonderful, beautiful space. It's a marvelous planet. I still think it's, the worst day on Earth is like 1,000,000 times better than the best day on Mars. But there's dangers and there's a risk, and we go up against them. And the fact that you can breathe something in and it could, just drop a human being or an elephant in a couple of days, shows that. It's remarkable.
What a great line. The worst day on Earth is 1,000,000 times better than the best day on Mars. And that gives me an opportunity to slam Elon Musk, who claims to be an environmentalist. He said with a straight face he's done more for the planet than any human in history. And to be fair, Tesla has spurred interest in electric cars. But in every other thing that he has done, every action that he takes every day on Twitter, on the political support he gives, he will be definitely endorsing Trump. Everything that he supports damages the earth. And so to claim to be an environmentalist and support these radical corporatist agendas of the radical right is horrifying. And by the way, if you care so much about the planet, why are you wasting your energy claiming that we're going to move the species to Mars when, maximum you're going to move a few thousand people, if ever? And what's that going to do for the planet? Basically, you're giving up on the planet by saying that that's going to happen. So sorry, Justin, that's just my rant, my Elon rant.
I'm curious though, Sri, because when I think about the car that he sent into space, and one thing that strikes me is the lack of spirituality involved in the way space is being explored. We put like commercial things and mark plaques and flags, but I don't see like prayer. And I don't mean prayer in the sense that the word, has gotten a little bit corrupted in the US, but spiritualism. But I'm also wondering with AI, if there's any of that, because it also seems to be going forward in a very commercial way. And there's a very spiritual side of like creating this technology. And I'm just curious if that's present or that's been abandoned.
Well, fascinating conversation and a longer conversation for another time. But I would say that the connection between AI and how you think about the spiritual world or just the humanity of it all is very important. And interestingly, I want to give everyone a website called RomeCall.org, Rome as in the city, call.org. And it's the Vatican pulling together experts from Microsoft, IBM, other religions to talk about the role of ethics, spirituality, morality in the AI world. So that's a pretty cool initiative. And they started it long before Gen AI. And with Gen AI, all of this is accelerated. All right, we got to move this along here. Otherwise, we're going to spend all our Sunday. We have about 20 minutes left. And here it is. Neil has pulled that up. And it's RomeCall.org. So check that out when you folks can. All right, let's get back to the paper. And this is where we can talk a little bit about the debate, which I did not see live. It was middle of the night in London, but I woke up to horrifying headlines and at 3, 4 in the morning. And here, as Harris defends Biden, she builds a case for herself. Former critics praised her work on Gaza and abortion rights. And I think it's going to be very difficult to see, the chances of Biden himself stepping down, that's the only way this is going to happen. And then if the party goes out, the party, as others have said, built on the base of African Americans, minorities, and women, will overlook a vice president who is a woman and African American and find a theoretical someone else is very unlikely. So if you have any comments, please jump in there. And days of denial are over at president's camp after unsteady debate. Biden's loyal inner circle has to hope for more good days. And apparently yesterday was a good day because he was out there very strong. We know he was very strong at the State of the Union, but everyone's already forgotten that. If you remember, Justin, the State of the Union was supposed to be a disaster, was going to be a disaster, and he did really well. And now people are talking about it. So, any thoughts? How did you look at all this?
I look at this. I love watching the Joseph Campbell interview series with Bill Moyers.
Oh yeah.
And I look at this really as like these myths playing out in real time. I mean, you have these on both sides, these aging figures, and clearly, we all know some of the background of one of them and the concerns, but really it's a very ancient thing to want to stay in power, and like the battle for power. There's what happens in a lot of like early history is, I mean, like the youth will actually take the elder out and subsume the power. I mean, that's really what they're talking about. It's not like slitting the throat like would happen in a previous time. At least I don't think what's coming, but it's a version of that. And I don't think it's going to go away. I mean, I think this is something we're going to be dealing with very much for the next couple months.
Yeah, and the way that this was Biden's ground rules, like they didn't have to make it 90 minutes. They didn't have to make it standing. They could have been sitting around a table and talking. Right, all of these. The timeline was chosen by him, and the part, and the DNC folks wanted the campaign wanted to kickstart the election as if Trump's lead was so high, so big that he had to fight it. When in fact the election has been very, very close, and polling was out just days before the debate about how close it was. Margin of error lead by Trump, and instead all of this happened. Blow was dealt, but First Lady says she's all in. At post-debate rally, loyal Trump supporters ponder Democrats' plan, and debate breeds doubt in donor classes. A story here: President Biden with Elton John on Friday. That's an interesting connection there. And by the way, the Joseph Campbell series about myths, NYTHS, if I'm not pronouncing it clearly, is amazing. And it's we started the show, if you remember, with Mark Hamill, who played Luke Skywalker, and George Lucas read the work of Joseph Campbell and based some of his work on Joseph Campbell's writing. And the series, I'm sure it's available on YouTube, by Bill Moyers, Moyers, for those of you who don't know, the interviews with Mr. Campbell, who was a philosopher and thinker and writer, is fascinating and really holds up, Justin, after all of these decades. And our former dean of journalism at Columbia, and my colleague and my dean, Joan Connor, executive produced that series that won Bill Moyer all this acclaim, in addition to all his other work, but put Joseph Campbell on the map. So look out for that series. If you can ever find it, even if you watch just 20 minutes, you'll be inspired, as George Lucas was, for the Star Wars story. And you'll see that. Let's keep going here. What else is in the news? Beryl, yeah, here it is. The Power of Myth, the Hero's Adventure. And this is the mythologist, Joseph Campbell. I'm so glad we could bring this up, Justin. I hope some people go and look this up. Joseph Campbell, you see the spelling. Bill Moyers, find it as Neil did. You will really enjoy it on the Soul's High Adventure. Really cool. Thank you. And by the way, look at this, folks. A science journalist bringing up spirituality, bringing up Joseph Campbell. I love that. He's an unusual guy, as you know already. Beryl, first hurricane of the season to bring life-threatening winds. Here we go. Killing of Texas girl is latest flashpoint in migrant policies. And Rikers inmate flees custody at hospital using city bus. That's an unusual story. And 4 prison guards are charged with murder in Missouri. And a judge blocks new Oklahoma immigration law. Lots happening in Oklahoma this week. As we know, the 10 Commandments are to be displayed and taught in Oklahoma public schools, as well as the Bible as a foundational document of the United States. It's just amazing that this is happening. Do you read the obits? Here's Jamie Kellner, 77 dies, turned Fox and Warner Brothers into thriving networks. And among the movies that he's responsible for, shows Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Dawson's Creek, Seventh Heaven, and some people of a certain age would know those shows very well.
I was watching your previous program, your interview with Amitabha and Kumar, and he drew. This is such a beautiful project to draw over the obits, to draw the flowers. I just was blown away by that. Gorgeous.
Yeah, he did that. That was fantastic. I love that. Elaine Schwartz, an innovative school principal. She implemented radical ideas at an institution that put the students first. She's the founder of the Center School, a public middle school in New York City. And Sika Anoa'i, 79 Hall of Famer and father of other wrestling stars. Wow. Okay.
No,
Roman Reigns is apparently a big wrestling star. And Orlando Cepeda, baseball star known as the Baby Bull, is dead at 86. A lot of attention being paid, as you know, Justin, these days to older stars, especially of the Negro Leagues. And we once, Neil and I, interviewed Bob Kendricks, the president of the Negro Leagues Museum in Kansas City, and it was a highlight for both of us to interview him. Kaz Hosaka, 65 handler, who led 2 poodles to Westminster glory. Wow, a lot of pet stuff in the paper today, folks. For those of you who missed it, there's a print section which is all about pets, and it's called How Science Went to the Dogs and Cats. And don't forget, if you are watching us now, for another 2 hours and 15 minutes, the New York Times Kids section is available only as a PDF. It's available in print if you subscribe, but by special arrangement with Amber Williams, the editor of the Kids section, you can download it on digimentors.group. Look for the New York Times read-along and look for Justin's face, and below Justin's links to his book and everything else. You can download this for free, but only till noon Eastern. Neil.
I wanted to just give a special shout out again to our friends Tom Jolly, Wayne Camadoy, and Amber Williams. What an incredible gift that they offer us every month to share the New York Times for Kids. Sri, I just want to point out, just in case for a technical issue, we have a number of comments that have come in on Facebook. I actually had to refresh my StreamYard screen to bring them in because they weren't coming in. So we have comments. Dr. Tachi is watching from Florida, if you didn't see that. And we had Makran saying, "We love your reading the news this way, like we all used to," which was really great. My mom said Swami Vivekananda gave a famous speech at the Parliament of World Religions in 1893, talking about my brothers and sisters of America. And to talk about Joseph Campbell, Raja Chowdhury, and I shared a link, Sri, to the PBS documentary earlier in Facebook. We talked about Joseph Campbell in our film America's First Guru, as he studied with Swami Nikhilananda on the Upper East Side. And Naomi
bringing
Service,
it all in. This is so
it's all together. And Naomi Service says Joseph Campbell's interview with Bill Moyers is a classic. I'll say that I actually have the book, The Power of Myth. I got that early on, and I read through it, and it's just fascinating. One of the more important books that I've read in my early life. So I'm so glad that came up in our discussion.
And the serendipity of it all coming up. So thank you, Justin. Let's keep going. We have 12 minutes. The book review, When Greed Was Good. In Triumph of the Yuppies, Tom McGrath revels in the stories of a generation that turns its back on protest and bought into consumer culture. And Justin, you were talking a little bit about that. And by the way, it's really cool that you have the paper in front of you, because I can see you flipping through it as well. And there's the Twin Towers there. And this is the era of those big cell phones, and greed is good was Gordon Gekko's famous statement in Wall Street with Michael Douglas. Let's keep going here. What are you reading these days?
I was reading, and still I'm reading, this incredible book of indigenous science fiction short stories, which is so cool. Yeah.
Ticking Time Bomb, the 1990s, a decade remembered as one of placid consensus, were roiled by resentment, unrest, and the rise of the radical right. When the clock broke, con men, conspiracists, and how America cracked up in the early 1990s. We think that it all happened in the aughts, but clearly it started earlier. So lots to read in the book section, including At Home with Joan, the late writer's assistant and companion, described his years working with Joan Didion. The Uptown Local, Joy, Death, and Joan Didion, a memoir by Corey Ledbetter. That should be fascinating as well. Joan spoke at graduation at one of the Columbia years. My 20 years at Columbia, Justin was a student there, and that's how we met. Let's look, Justin, at the Sunday Opinion. This is the controversy that we alluded to at the beginning. Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker of all people, who has been very critical of Trump, posted that criticizing the New York Times opinion section for publishing 5 editorials. And Manisha Sinha, also one of our friends, pointed out there are 5 editorials in the New York Times calling on Biden to resign, but not one asking for Trump to resign. And
just to clarify, Sri, it was Mark Hamill was defending President Biden,
yes,
and
correct.
and not so much talking about the Times.
Yes.
It was Manisha who pointed out that they had
Correct.
5 editorials attacking Biden. And I do want to mention, in case folks missed it earlier, it was the New York Times editorial that you're looking at right now, that Biden should step aside. In contrast, the Philly Inquirer published an editorial saying that Donald Trump should step aside for the good of the nation. So just a good counterpoint.
I presume the Times' defense will be that we're being practical. There's no way Trump is resigning. So that's why I'm not defending it. I'm just saying that's probably what they will say. Why Republicans are talking about Biden's dictatorship, that's to get us ready for the other dictatorship that might come. 4 writers on what Democrats should do. And Harris 2024 sounds pretty good right about now. That's Lydia Polgreen, Columbia J School student, who wrote an editorial saying it should be Harris. And this is Tom Friedman. Biden's a good man, but he must not run. So this is the controversy. We already touched upon this right from the get-go of the show, and we've talked about it multiple times. And the West Bank is ready to explode. We saw that things are going to get worse there as well. And here is that editorial. To serve his country, President Biden should leave the race. And then today's teen slang is pure poetry. What an unusual thing to just stumble across. Kid lingo captures the modern world perfectly. My favorite new slang word is based, short for based in fact and based in reality, and often used as a term of assent when someone states a controversial opinion. So I guess you would, if someone says Canada should join the United States, one might say, to which someone might reply, based. It's typically used for political subjects, but it can serve, have a wider social utility. Luka Doncic should be the MVP of the NBA. Based. I've never heard that, but my kids are too old probably.
And cringe. I see they highlight the word cringe. My nephews always use this word, cringe.
But are they using it differently than you and I might?
They just use it commonly, and it covers a lot of ground.
Here's the father of the 11-year-old to help
all
us.
the time. Cringe. Usually directed at the adults.
All right. Here's the trick, the Arts and Leisure cover. And just we have a few minutes. The trick is making the ink reappear. A book by a Jewish author who was killed in the Holocaust comes to light with help from a magician. What an unusual story. And cover of this section, I definitely want to read what that's about and who the magician is. And Jews in Magic was published in 1933 and faded from memory. And this magician, Richard Hatch, championed a German author killed in the Holocaust. What an unusual story. The Times Magazine is Underworld. Scientists are only now beginning to understand the mysterious microbes that live deep within the earth and may even have helped shape it.
I'm so excited for this. So excited.
Yeah, you'd geek out on this. We should be reading this story together, but we don't have time to get into it. Real estate cover is Saving a Showman's Show House. The Metropolitan cover, which you can only get in the tri-state area, I believe. Once again, he's ahead of what's hip. Soho Lofts offices turned into condos. Joseph Pell Lombardi has the last laugh. And here's an upstate story. Buffalo area grapples with a cascade of overdoses. And Sunday Styles cover draft night fashion. Top NBA prospects showed off their looks. Are you a sports guy?
Sometimes.
Okay, what's your sport?
Well, my sport is again I go back to Amitabha. He said mindful walking. Right now, that's my sport. Mindful
Okay,
walking.
I love it. The frozen generation, young women searching for the right career parenthood balance are fueling a boom in the egg freezing industry. That doesn't sound that new to me because I think in the aughts we heard a lot about that, but obviously it must have become bigger. And volatile forces may reshape global manufacturing. That's the Sunday Business cover. All right, folks, we just have a couple of minutes. We want to do two things or multiple things. We want to remind everyone to get your own free copy of the New York Times for Kids. You can only get it if you're watching live till noon Eastern. Today, June 30th. We do this at the last Sunday of every month. So join us then to get this. You have to go to digimentors.group, New York Times read along button, Justin's face, go down, click and find it, and you can download it and share it with your friends and family. Special arrangement with the New York Times for Kids. We also have a special pet section, which those of you who are pet people will want. Oh, that's not, that's, many people don't want that to be read, but there's somewhere here a pet section that you can look at. Also, we want to, here's that lead article from the pet section, how science went to the dogs and cats. So it's amazing that we have a science writer today with so many science stories right off the bat. So that's great to see. I just want to put back up here what Sujana said. So many New York Times subscription cancellations and Philly Inquirer subscriptions posted on Twitter because of how that was covered. And Sujana also said, also in poor journalism this week, the Newsweek article criticizing Taylor Swift but not Travis Kelce for being 34, unmarried, no kids, and therefore a poor role model when Travis is all of those things as well. And Newsweek, by the way, is completely different from what it used to be. And so you have to be careful when you're citing or looking at Newsweek. All right, Neil, let's, you want to jump in? Yeah.
More comments, Reed, depending on what you're seeing on your screen. Carolyn Harding said, follow your bliss from Joseph Campbell. Ken Fisher said, Justin, good job. You embody two lifelong passions since my boyhood, journalism and environmentalism. Thank you for your hugely imperative mission. More from Sujana, felons as a rule should not be president.
But it's not a rule. They just have to be 35 of age and natural born
right?
citizen. That's all.
And let's see what else. Raja Chowdhury is saying, I am canceled every day by my 17-year-old daughter and her friends. So more flack from our youngsters there.
Yes, dads of girls.
Mary Curtis, former guest on the show, roll call columnist, commentator from North Carolina. A great conversation. So wonderful to have you back. Thank you, Mary. Glad to be back. Now that the world is on fire, we came back right in time. From North Carolina, where our GOP governor candidate, Mark Robinson, is making his own kind of headlines. And Dr. Tachi was referring back to what we were talking about earlier, extremely poor journalism. This was such a great conversation. Thank you all. Absolutely.
And check out Dr. Tachi's show on IG. She's great. Follow, and you'll love listening to her. So what we're going to do, Justin, is take you off camera for a minute, let you catch your breath. We're going to come back to you and make you talk about your book one more time, and as immodestly as possible. Folks like Justin and other writers were taught you just write your story and then it just goes out, and there's a whole system that gets it out there. But as he knows now, we have to do some of this work. So we're going to come back, and he's going to be immodest about his book and tell us why we should read it and why we need to know all about Petroleum 238. So we'll just take you off for a minute there, Justin. Neil, great show. Justin was fantastic, and I learned so much from him, and I can't wait to just tell more and more people about his book. We have a lot going on, but not next week because we're taking July 4th weekend off. So please join us when we come back the following week. We have another great guest. Anna Packman is joining us. Check her out on IG. She's at Annotated, and she's a writer, director, producer. Her movie is called Wheelchair Money, and she is a great digital expert on top of all of this. And she's someone who's guided me to understand how to be an ally of people who are dealing with many different difficulties, physical and other difficulties and disabilities. So thank you very much, Anna, for joining us on July 14th. And speaking of books and all this good stuff, Neil, I just wanted to tell folks some of the books that have come in, including Connecting the Dots with my friend Toby Usnick. We're going to get him on the show in the fall. We're booked up till September already. And if you have a friend or if you yourself would like to be a guest on the show, you don't need a book to be a guest on the show. Please let us know. And he's written Building Your Network and Legacy, Toby Usnick with Samir Kanuga. Check out his book. We also have gotten Proximity, How Coming Breakthroughs in Just-in-Time Transform Business, Society, and Daily Life by Robert Wolcott and Kaihan Kippendorf. We had a great time helping launch that book. And I finally got a physical copy of Salman Rushdie's wonderful meditation after an attempted murder. It's called Knife. And just look at the design of this book and how that's put together here. And there he is on the back with his, he lost an eye and so much more, as you know. And that's what Salman looks like now. And in India, I was there, Neil, in part, as you know, I went for work, but I went for the launch of my dad's 11th book. It's called Diplomacy Liberated, and the Golden Treasury of T.P. Srinivasan, who's been a guest on the show in the past. And it's edited by Wing Commander Raghushri Nair, who was in the Indian Air Force. And it's a collection of 100 of his favorite essays that he's written over the last 20 years. He's written more than 1,500 essays. And these are his 100 favorites are in here. And we'll be having a New York launch event sometime this summer. So if you're in New York, please join us for that. And we are just so happy to be back with our community. And Dr. Chachi says, how wonderful, congrats to Dad. And my dad was a friend of Neil's before Neil was a friend of mine. And so I'm glad that we'll be able to talk more about his book later this year. And so I think we're ready to bring back Justin. Just a reminder, everyone, we'll go off the air and then we'll be live. We'll be recorded on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn. Please tell your friends. And the New York Times for Kids is available till noon Eastern if you're watching us live right now. And tell your friends. So let's bring back Justin. And Justin, I want to ask you again, tell us how you pronounce your name, because I work with the Nobel Prizes, and that's how they spell Alfred's name is spelled with E-L, which is also your name. Justin, your last name is Nobel. When are you getting the Nobel Prize? Or is it pronounced like Barnes and Noble?
Most people pronounce it more like Barnes and Noble, but even within the family, there are some disagreements over this. Yeah, I like that. That's beautiful document.
Yeah. And that's Neil's mom, for those who don't know who are watching. So this is a family show. So Justin, let's go to you and talk a little bit about the book and be as immodest as you possibly can.
Yeah, well, first of all, wonderful show, really fun. Thank you, Sri and Neil, and great listeners too. The book Petroleum 238: Big Oil's Dangerous Secret and the Grassroots Fight to Stop It. I guess the main thing to say, Sri, is the book had an interesting publishing story. It was to be published by Simon & Schuster, which is a big publisher based in New York City. It was really exciting. But last summer, Simon & Schuster got bought by a notorious private equity firm called KKR. Among other assets that to me seemed questionable, KKR has major investments in oil and gas and a variety of different initiatives connected to oil and gas. They actually own an oil and gas company. So this presented me with a big moral decision as a writer who have just spent years investigating this. Can I still publish a book with a publisher now owned by a company that has significant assets and actually owns, versions of the thing I've been investigating? And so I pulled the book from Simon & Schuster that no longer seemed appropriate. And there was quite a journey to the present moment, which was really the best way to get the book, which I think has a lot of content and information that's needed now. The best way to get it out was to publish ourselves, essentially. And so we used this company called Ingram. Ingram is a distributor for bookstores across the country. Go into your local bookstore, chances are Ingram brings them the books, and they have a great self-publishing tool. And so the book, we worked with, this photo, by the way, is a colleague of mine, Julie Dermansky, absolutely incredible. This is not Photoshop. This is a home in Louisiana that's actually right in front of a refinery. So that's a real photo. And then we worked with the designer on the cover, and we're able to put together, all the accoutrements of a formal book. But like you say, not publishing with a big publisher, you got it three. The work then becomes getting it out. And so I've been on this kind of grand tour with the book, touring with scientists, touring with musicians in different parts of the country doing readings. And coming up next week, I actually will be out in Colorado and New Mexico. So if folks are in that area, some really great events set up in the Denver area, in Western Colorado, and then in Northern New Mexico and Santa Fe, Albuquerque, and Taos. And I'll be doing that because I found that's a really nice way to get the material out, to do a live event at a bookstore, a community space, a library, college, all sorts of venues. Music venues have been exciting too. So if people are out there interested in the book, definitely go to your local bookstore. Even if they don't have it, they'll be able to order it. You can get it online through the normal online ordering channels. And if you're really interested and think your community would be interested, I'd be happy to try and set up some sort of tour at a later date. That I have found is a really exciting way to talk about the topic and the book.
Wow. Well, a couple of quick reactions. How do people get in touch? What's your website where they can look you up?
Yeah, the website is justinnobel.com. I've got a blog spot. It's petroleum238.blogspot.com, and that has the tour dates and also the running press, the news about the book. And my email is really simple. That's for me. I'm old school, what now would be considered old school. Email me, justinnobel@gmail.com, and that's really the best way to quickly get me a message. And yeah, there's the blog spot, and there you see the upcoming dates in Colorado.
Amazing. The other thing I want to say is Simon & Schuster, Mr. Schuster went to Columbia Journalism School class of 2013. Not 2013, 1913, Mr. Schuster. And I don't think I've ever heard of an author pulling a book. I know publishers pull books for a variety of reasons occasionally, but for you to give up the payday, the opportunity, the platform is stunning. And I really want to commend you for sticking with your principles. Did you consider maybe that getting it out there would force them to kind of be exposed a little more? And how did you weigh that decision? This could not have been easy. And as I said, I salute you for it.
Yeah, it's, there's a lot of complicated questions that arose. And I'm actually writing an article about this decision for a national magazine, which is nice. It gives me a chance to explore. But I think the concern is multiple. And when you do a book like this, you're representing a lot of other voices, and you're representing the voices of people who've been really harmed by this industry, and many of the most harmed are the workers themselves. And I have, a quick way to answer the question is I'm not just thinking of myself, but I'm also thinking of how I'm representing these people and the best way to do it. And is it just to get it out and to get it out in any way possible, or is it to get it out through a mechanism that doesn't seem connected to the harms that were brought on them? But it's a difficult choice, as you point out.
Amazing. I'm so impressed, even more impressed, Justin, with you and your principles. Really, really appreciate it. Folks that are still watching, thank you for being with us. Please support Justin, justinnobel.org, justinnobel.com, justinnobel.com. Please support him. Check out his website. There we put it on, and Twitter is @JustinNobel. And Kaveri says, this show is like a modern day version of Tom Hanks in the film News of the World. That's an incredible compliment, as were all those other lovely things that people say. We love doing this, and Neil and I have been talking about doing something around the election, in the run-up to the election. How can we do a version of this without, necessarily about the paper, but just talking about everything that's going on in just the last few days right before the election. So stay tuned for that. But otherwise, we're back July 14th with Anna Packman. And we want to thank everybody who's watching. Tag a friend, tell a friend, 8:30 a.m. Sundays, Eastern Time. And Linda says, thanks for a great show and have a good week. Thanks, everybody. And thank you, Justin. Check him out. Sudha says, thanks for
several other comments, Sri, before we log off.
Please, pull them up.
My mom, thanks for a great show. Raja Chowdhury says, thank you. Deborah Bernick from Arlington, Virginia says, excellent show. And I know Deborah is a fan of New York Times for Kids. She shares it with all the young ones in her life. Makran Boot did what we asked people to do, tagged a friend. I like to recommend as a guest or mentioned, I'd like to recommend Ramu as a guest for the show.
Ramu is a friend, and he'll be a great guest on the show.
And Diana, excellent guest. I learned so much. Thank you, Digimentor staff, for this weekly news digest. We don't get the New York Times until late mornings in the San Francisco area. This show allows me to hear some of the news earlier in case I don't get to read the paper before leaving the house. Thanks again, Justin. And Kaveri has thoroughly enjoyed this. My first New York Times read along with Sri and Neil. So she must have caught a few shows that I guest hosted earlier in
and Kaveri, we'd love to have you talk about all your books. She's an amazingly prolific author. Justin, someone like you who's written this book, how much effort it takes. So when you meet, I'm sure when you meet authors who've written multiple books, you appreciate the difficulty and the complexity of that.
She is booked for the fall. We're going to be having her on the show a little bit later. We'll close with a comment from Dr. Tachi. There's nothing like the NYTR, the New York Times Read Along. Thank you so much, Dr. Tachi. We need to get her on the show, Sri.
Yeah, we do.
Get her back.
Yeah. I'll go down to Florida and interview her there live. That would be fun.
Great.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Justin, good luck with your show. With your book, the tour. Good luck with the Miss Carrot store in Hudson, New York. Anybody in the region, go support Ms. Carrot, MISSKARRET. It's a clothing store, handmade, hand-printed, everything. It's a dress shop owned by his girlfriend, and also the backdrop of his many appearances, apparently. So that's cool. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.